Okay, class. So we're on page 60, questions 1 through 10, and we're answering the circumference of circles in terms of pi, and we're trying to find the radius of particular circles. So I answered these questions ahead of time to save a little bit of time, and let's go down each one of these. For question number 1, they want us to find the circumference in terms of pi. They tell me that the radius is 4.2 centimeters. So here's my formula for the radius. Here's my formula for the circumference, which is 2 pi r. So it's going to be 2 times pi times the radius, which is 4.2. I multiply 2 times 4.2, and that gives me 8.4 pi. So right here is my circumference in terms of pi. If I kept going, it would give me the circumference in centimeters, but it's asking me for the circumference in terms of pi. So I can stop right there. Question number 2, again, they're asking me for the circumference in terms of pi again. My radius is 3.5. My formula is circumference equals to 2 pi r. I plug in the 3.5 for the radius. 2 times 3.5 is 7. So my circumference in terms of pi is 7 pi. Question number 3 and 4, they're asking me to find the radius. And remember the formula that the circumference is equal to pi times the diameter as well. And here they're giving me this, they're telling me the circumference is 13.4 inches. So I take my circumference of 13.4 inches and I decide to put it in terms of pi. I divide it by pi. When I divide 13.4 by pi, I get 4.26, and I put the pi next to it, so now I have my circumference in terms of pi. Why is that important? Because remember that the circumference is pi times the diameter. Well, here I have my circumference with pi, then 4.26 must be my diameter. And if my diameter is 4.26, well then my radius is 2.13. So putting the circumference in terms of pi has the benefit of being able to see the diameter and the radius. So if you take a look at question number 4, again, here they're giving my circumference. They tell me it's 62. So I take my circumference and I divide it by pi. When I do that, I get my circumference in terms of pi, 19.74 pi. And by the way, if I multiply these two together, I get 62. Back when I started, 62. But right here, I have my circumference in terms of pi. Why is that useful? Because if my circumference is in terms of pi, then here is my diameter. And if this is my diameter, my radius is half of that. So my radius is 9.87 feet. And we did a lot of those problems in class. Question number 5. They want to know the actual arc length of AB. So here I have a circle. It has a central angle of 50 degrees. The radius is 9 inches. And they're asking me for the arc length of AB. Right away, the first thing that you should do when you see a problem like this is find the circumference. Because if you're asking me to find this little arc length right here, it'd be a good idea to know what the whole circumference of the circle is, right? Obviously, we know that the formula for circumference is 2 pi r. My radius is 9, so my circumference is 2 times pi times 9. 9 times 2 is 18 pi. So right here, my circumference is in terms of pi. And if I keep going, I get the circumference in inches, which is 56.52. So I know the circumference of the whole circle is 56.52. I want to find the actual length of this arc right here, which, by the way, if this central angle is 50, then I know that this arc here is also 50 degrees. So it's 50 divided by 360 times the circumference gives me 7.85 inches, which means that arc AB, although it's 50 degrees, it actually measures 7.85 inches in length. And then to put it in terms of pi, all I do is divide it by pi, and 7.85 divided by pi gives me, or divided by 3.14 gives me 2.52 pi. So here's my answer in terms of inches. Here's my answer in terms of pi. Question number 6, I do the same thing again. They tell me that the central angle is 140. They tell me the radius is 12.6. They want to know how big this arc right here is in its actual length. Actually, if the central angle is 140, then I know that this arc is also going to be 140 degrees. First thing I want to find is my circumference. So circumference is 2 pi r. I plug it in. My circumference is 79.128. So that means the distance around this whole circle is 79.128 centimeters. I want this length right here, so I take my ratio, which is 140 divided by 360 times the circumference, gives me 30.79. So there's my arc length in centimeters, and if I wanted to put it in terms of pi, Well, I take it, I divide it by pi, divided by 3.14, and I get 9.80 pi. So my arc length is 30.79 in centimeters and 9.8 pi in terms of pi. Question number 7, I do the same thing again. Here's my, I find my radius is 7.5. This central angle is 150. They want to know how big this arc is. So naturally, this arc is also going to be 150 degrees. The first thing I want to know is, what is the circumference of the circle? So I use my formula here, and it comes out to be 47.1. I know that this arc is 150 degrees out of 360. So there's my ratio for the arc. I multiply that by the circumference, and I get 19.62 inches. So the arc length of AB here is 19.62 inches. If I want to put it in terms of pi, I divide it by 3.14, and I get 6.25 pi. So here's my circumference in terms of inches. Here's my circumference in terms of pi. And by the way, if I take 6.25 and I multiply it times pi, I'm going to get my 19.62 inches. Question number 8 is the exact same kind of question, except that for question number 8, they give me the diameter. So I know if my diameter is 14, I know my radius is half of that. It's going to be 7. So again, the first thing I find is the circumference, plug it into my formula. Here's my circumference. They wanted me to tell me the measure of this arc length here, so it's 65 out of 360. Multiply by the circumference, I get 7.93 inches. And what I did here was I just put it in terms of pi, so I get 2.52 pi. Question number 9 and 10 were a little bit different because 9 and 10, they didn't give me the radius, but that doesn't mean I can't find the circumference. I can solve questions 9 and 10 when they don't give me the radius or the circumference. I can use a ratio or a proportion to solve it. So here I know that 24 centimeters is equivalent to the central angle of 135. So I put 24 centimeters over 135 degrees. Put my arc length in centimeters over degrees. Well, if I put centimeters over degrees on the other side of my ratio or proportion, I'm going to have centimeters over degrees. Well, obviously, I'm looking for the circumference, and the circumference has 360 degrees. So I cross multiply. So 135 times x is 135x. 24 times 360 is 8,640. Divide both sides by 135, and x is equal to 64 centimeters. So I know now that my circumference, because remember that's what we were finding, the circumference is 64 centimeters. And I just take it, if I divide it by pi, I'll have my answer in terms of pi. Same thing with question number 10. They give me the reflex measure here. They tell me that 36.8 centimeters is the same as 260 degrees. So I put my ratio here, my proportion. So if I have centimeters over degrees, on this side I'm going to have centimeters over degrees. So 36.8 centimeters gives me 260 degrees. And I don't know how many centimeters are in the circumference, but I do know that it's going to give me 360 degrees. So I cross multiply. 260 times x is 260x. 36.8 times 360 is 13,248. Divide both sides by 260. X is 50.94. So really, the circumference is 50.94. And then just to put it in terms of pi, I divide 50.94 by pi, and I get 16.22 pi. Now remember, this question is asking for the what? It's asking for the radius. So by putting my answers in terms of pi, I have here, remember the circumference is also equal to pi times the diameter. I know what the diameter is here. I know that the diameter is 16.22. So putting the answer in terms of pi gives me the added benefit of getting more information. So if my diameter is 16.22, I know my radius is going to be half of that, which is 8.11. And this is page 60, questions 1 through 10. And we're finding the circumference and the radius in terms of